4,000 homes, farms, schools, and businesses in Nevada and Placer counties.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Nevada County Interviews. I'm your host, Paul Minicucci. And tonight it's our pleasure to have a very special guest in the studio with us, Alden Olmsted. Alden, welcome to the set.
Thanks. Thanks for welcoming me. That's cool.
And we're going to be talking about a very serious and urgent issue, the possible closing of some of our local state parks forced on us by the budget situation. But before we do that, we can't let an Olmsted get on the show without talking a little bit about your dad and your distant cousin, Frederick Olmsted, who is really the great granddaddy of parks in many ways. Certainly, a founder of many famous parks. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about yourself. So you're born and raised in Sonoma County, is that right?
Born and raised in Sonoma, Glen Ellen, Sonoma, right down the street from Jack London State Park. And my parents, were divorced at an early age. Right. So I grew up knowing my dad mostly from pictures and stories. And then, and he would visit, but mostly my brother and I and my mom grew up in Sonoma. And, for all intents and purposes, had a kind of a normal small town life there. And started to reconnect with my dad about the mid-'90s and found the Yuba River and started to visit every summer.
Right. Right. And your father, of course, was single-minded, to say the least, I think, about saving this land and dedicating his life and your life in some fashion, to saving our parkland and the creating state parks in the Northern California area. So
yeah. I mean, Jug Handle near Mendocino was the first one that he officially saved, and I think, watching a grassroots effort come together and people coming together and then being victorious, I think that kind of whet his appetite. And then after taking cross-California trips with school children in the 70s, he found the Excelsior mining canals and then purchased land from Joe Day and and the rest. A lot of the rest is in my movie that I made. But and then the second chapter of his life sort of was up here. The Independence Trail, Bridgeport, helping to save that, make that a legitimate park, and then the third chapter would have been Goat Mountain and trying to continue the legacy of Cross California Trail, which was his ultimate dream.
That was his goal, right? To be able to
and that's because of John Muir walked across California in 1868. Dad wanted to do it in 1968.
Right.
And then once he found that there were too many, suburbs and roads, he moved his journey up from San Francisco to about Highway 20. Right. And so most of his lands that he purchased are on or near Highway 20 across the state.
It's an interesting way of looking at it. And of course, also want to talk a little bit about your cousin, Frederick Law Olmsted, who is famous for developing many parks, including Central Park in New York.
Right. Yeah, he won a contest to do that, or a commission to do that, and together with Calvert Vaux, he designed that park and ran it for many years. And then the interesting thing is that after he had done Boston's Emerald Necklace and Prospect Park in Brooklyn, and he laid out the city of Buffalo as he was passing through one time. I mean, it's just amazing mind. And then he got a letter from a friend who begged him and had to write a few letters back and forth to beg him to come out to California and run a gold mine operation. And he kind of did need a break, I think, from being entangled with the bureaucracy of running Central Park. It was sort of taxing. So he took his family, he was a devoted family man, took his family out to Mariposa and ran the Mariposa, I can't remember exactly what it was called, Mariposa Gold Company.
Right.
And then in the summer, to get away from the heat, they would go up the road with horses and about 6 to 8 weeks of supplies to a little valley called
Yosemite.
Yosemite. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't imagine
Yes.
going up there for the summer.
Yeah.
You know,
And
just to.
And as he pointed out, one of the things I did on knowing you were coming aboard was to do a little research on him, and I read through his 1865 report to the legislature about Yosemite.
They probably should read it again, but why don't,
Yeah, and it's he said it was a 3 to 4 day journey from Stockton.
Yeah.
And so it included, going through Mariposa and how you got up to Yosemite.
Right.
So that was really interesting. And I know my first spouse family were early pioneers up in the Tahoe area, and what they used to go through to get up to Tahoe was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it was a long journey. And
You had
taking
to have
wagons up over the boulders was no easy chore.
Yeah, you had to have a good destination, and Tahoe, Yosemite, those are destinations worthy of a couple.
And I did. I want to read a couple of quotes from that report because it, I think, bears on the whole idea about what it is a state government, has in the way of a duty to protect and to make accessible parklands. So this is what Frederick Olmsted had to say from his report. He said, "A more important class of considerations than economic impact, however, remains to be stated. These are considerations of a political duty of grave importance to which seldom, if ever, before has proper respect been paid by any government in the world, but the grounds of which rest on the same eternal base of equity and benevolence with all other duties of a republican government. It is the main duty of government, if it is not the sole duty of government, to provide means of protection for all citizens in the pursuit of happiness against obstacles otherwise insurmountable, which the selfishness of individuals or combinations of individuals is liable to interpose to that pursuit." And then a little later on in his report, he said, "To simply reserve them, the parklands, from monopoly by individuals, however, it will be obvious, is not all that is necessary. It is necessary that they should be laid open to the use of the body of the people." And I thought that that was a really profound statement that maybe we've lost sight of in the present circumstance. So we are going to talk a little bit more about the crisis and what we can do about it, what you can do about it, and what it all means. But before we do that, we thought we would run a little videotape, and then we're going to take a journey through some of the state parks via some slides.
Yeah, I am a filmmaker, so I started. A couple people asked me early on, "Are you filming this?" And I just thought, I just got done filming my dad. Can I have a break? But no, there is no break.
Yeah, before we do that, where's the film of your dad? Is it playing? Can we watch it anywhere? Or?
Well, we're waiting on the Mill Valley Film Festival to hear the official word, and that would be in October. And if you're down near Mill Valley, that would be welcome to see it. Otherwise, the Wild and Scenic Film Festival. And I think that's in January, sometime, mid-January.
Right.
So those would be the two next times when we could see it in Northern California.
Oh, great, great. So, okay, if we're ready in the control room, let's run the first video.
Go ahead and talk.
Okay.
There's audio. There's a song. I didn't. Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry, I didn't know we weren't.
My name is Alden Olmsted.
There should be a song with this.
Yeah, I think we're watching it.
One of California's 70 state parks.
So now, let's talk about what it is that we're watching.
Yeah, well, I just started to realize that as I'm going around to these parks, it would help to do a little PSA, a little public service announcement about the parks. And
myself and a
and
lot
I
of other
started
people think
here
it'd be a bad idea
at the South
for a lot of
University.
reasons. Public safety,
They're still talking about
wildfires, all kinds of damage to our state parks that a lot of people worked really hard to build. Like my dad, the guy in the bucket, John Olmsted. John Olmsted built and saved Jug Handle State Reserve near Mendocino, Bridgeport Covered Bridge down the river, and the Independence Trail, wheelchair nature trail, just up the road a quarter mile here in the South Yuba River State Park. I've started this simple bucket campaign asking every California resident to give just $1, and it's working. We've raised almost $20,000 so far, and letters are pouring in from all over the state, people telling me how much they do care about the parks, and absolutely they don't want them closed. So I hope that you will join me and thousands of others as we save California state parks and say to Sacramento emphatically, you will not and cannot close our parks. They're way too important to us. So please go to johnolmsted.net, donate today or look for one of these buckets with my dad's face.
Well, that's a short, brief PSA message about what's going on.
Yeah, just trying to remind people that the parks were built, in this case, some of them were built by my dad, John Olmsted. His father was just was a UCLA professor for 25 years and then went on to found UC Riverside. And Dad started climbing around the hills of, the then undeveloped hills of Southern California above Sunset Boulevard.
Right.
And then went to Mammoth as a kid and, just did the whole thing. And after college and becoming a botanist, moved up north and found Golden Gate Park. Was offered a job as a botanist at Golden Gate Park. Moved up to Mendocino. So, I guess with my program, what I wanted to remind people was that there's stories behind these parks. So it's not just closing parks. It's cutting off a link of how the parks were built, why they were built, the fact that they were given over from a private person to the state meant that they were extremely significant and not something that we can just throw away. Now, if we are going to throw it away, in my opinion, there better be a serious amount of money, more than $22 million of a savings. And if we are going to, just like you were going to, an environmental impact report or something, if you're going to build a shopping center, how long would that take? Sometimes years. They're trying to close the parks in a matter of months. That's not enough time to decide, even if we were going to decide to close them, to close parks. Just not enough time.
Right. There's so many considerations that have to be, on the one hand, there's the economic, as Frederick talks about, and he made lots of points about what happens to rural economies when you have parks, and how the traveler needs to be, treated and has
Fed
to be, fed and
fed in the soul, in the heart and the soul. You have to.
And then there's the deeper moral issue about, why. So in order to take parkland out of the private property, enterprise and environment, you have to have a reason for that. And the reason is because they're important. And the reason is because the government has the duty to make these parklands not only sustainable and in the public domain, but also, as he said, Frederick, it's not enough just to keep them from other people. It's, you have to
preserve them and
and make a way to have the people actually get there. So access is an important part. So let's start our tour around with the slideshow, and Alden will narrate as we go through.
Sure, yeah. It's kind of fun to look back, actually, because it feels like a longer journey than just 3 months, but it started right here in Nevada City.
First slide.
Well, so the first buckets I had, I didn't know what else to do, so I just decided to go down to the river and start, sit there with a card table and start trying to collect donations. The union did an article on it, and obviously that's our 49 bridge locally here, and that's where it started. Just about 2 weeks after we got the notice on May 13th that the parks were on a closure list. Everyone couldn't believe, how can you put the South Yuba River on a closure list, because you can't close it. People will jump the gate and still go. So,
we're going to get into those issues in a little bit. Next slide.
So then this one's awesome, because this is at a park in Santa Rosa where these are all rangers. These are all high up rangers. They took their state park uniforms off and donated, because that's how much. See the guy on the left? He didn't want his face to be in, but that's his ranger green shirt. So they actually did. And that's this first bucket is where it all started. And so that was kind of cool. And that's when I started to realize I was on the right track, that I really had something that people cared about. I think a lot of people were just waiting for someone to step forward. And I don't know that it had to be me or that I cared it to be me. It's just no one else was doing it.
Right.
So.
And the idea that you had a dollar from everybody would save these parks. Yeah,
and that's just something I blurted out to Steve at KVMR. I was walking by and he yelled, "Hey, they're going to close your dad's parks." And I said, "What? You got to be mistaken. Something's wrong." I looked at the computer screen and he printed it out for me, and I said, "Well, this is ridiculous. We got 38 million people. Why don't we just everyone give $1?" So I put it on my car and I started to drive around and did buttons and T-shirts and so there's the first union art, actually that's Marin. Sorry, that's in Marin, and that's at China Camp State Park, which is crazy because there's a guy that lives at China Camp, and his family's been shrimping those waters since before the water got channeled to Southern California, and there were shrimp in the waters.
Next slide. That we all know.
That we all know, and this is just driving around, just taking pictures and trying to be on the journey.
Next slide.
And so then I went down to Santa Cruz Mission and started to realize at that point that there was a second issue, and that's preserving these things. If we were going to close them, well, what about all the artifacts inside? In this case, the mission, the building is the artifact.
Right.
So how do you close that? And if you're going to close it, that's one thing. How do you protect it? And those are questions that the state has not been able to answer. And they've admitted they don't have an answer. So
There's a close-up
the
of
bucket is getting around, yeah. We apologize, California State Parks is facing an embrace. So they already have signs up because some of the parks are closed for a couple days during the week, and this has already been happening.
Right.
And then just going south, there's beautiful Garrapatta State Beach, which doesn't have its own visitor center or kiosk, but it's just gorgeous. I mean, you can't imagine closing it or allowing it to be jeopardized in any way. And that's on the way to Big Sur, and staying with friends, meeting a lot of good people. And going up to the next slide would be Henry Coe, probably. Henry Coe has a really good association. A lot of these parks, do have associations that are already trying to local associations that help them out. And so, because you can't donate to one park. So if you want to donate to a park, you donate to the local association. So Henry Coe, and you can keep going on the slides. So the rangers are here. I just met a lot of great people, just good people that care about the parks. And my dad, John Olmsted, his big mission was education. These people are concerned with education. They want to be there. They want the parks to be open. And this is not just for their jobs. These are low-paying jobs. The people love the parks. They love working outdoors. They love telling people about the parks. You can keep going.
And there's great demand for those people
yeah.
to get into parks. I know it's not like a typical bureaucrat. Oh, gee whiz, I make my state money here. Those folks really fall in love with their park.
Yeah, they have all different interests. The rangers I've met, some are. This was one at Henry Coe. She was really interested in the local education programs, and she was real big with the school kids coming up. That's Sheila, and so I really started to. Just kind of get to know the inner workings of these parks and where I was going. This is up at Railtown 1897. You can see it says Railtown on there. And this one was cool because right when I showed up, a check also showed up addressed to Railtown Save the Parks. And they didn't know what to do with it. And then the lady came running out and said, "Oh, is that guy with the buckets?" Oh, good, because the support has started to come in. So then people started to write in. And this was what really got to me is, they were, using my dad's nonprofit obviously is a little surreal still for me, but that they were writing in Alden Olmsted Save State Parks, and really was cool. And then Sherry at Lake Tahoe there in the background, you can see it's at her ice cream cart, and people started to really just, I guess, love the idea of this simple bucket with the guy's face and who is this guy, and so that's why I put "Who is John Olmsted" on the back of every bucket. And at some point the buckets started to get more popular, and then we did have a rally, Save the State Parks rally, put on by the State Parks Foundation on the steps of the Capitol. Yep, on June 21st, and I was invited to speak along with, next slide, Jared Huffman. So he's the one from Sonoma County, Sonoma and Marin, that wrote AB 42 that states hopefully nonprofits will be able to go into relationships with the parks to help run them. But that's still a challenge because, as we all know, volunteers take a lot of work to manage themselves, and they're not free. So I was invited to speak actually right after Robert Hanna, who was John Muir's great-great-grandson. So that was pretty cool. So we got to speak, and that's their new motto is "Closing state parks are bad for business." This is right here in Grass Valley as I started to mail the buckets out. You can see the buckets start to change as people started to donate me a little bit nicer, more uniform buckets. And so then this was CBS did a story back in Marin at China Camp, and that's the cameras there. And they were meeting people that didn't know the parks were on the list. They were just visiting, and everyone I went to was shocked. This is Frank, who lives right there, and he sells the hot dogs on the weekends and runs the stand there. And he's got a bucket now. And then the way it's worked with the buckets, I have to have a local volunteer to deposit the money into the bank account. So I started making T-shirts and.
Right. And there's no doubt that the local folks depend upon the tourist traffic for their livelihood, and somebody needs to be able to figure that out.
Right. Here's the 4th of July parade right here in Grass Valley, where I put, so it's kind of last minute, but I put every state park that was on the list and I strung them along the side of the car, and obviously with the a 19-foot long car, you can string a lot of them. And then Flower Garden Bakery. I mean, the local businesses have been just amazing. I mean, Briar Patch, Mother Truckers, Flower Garden, all these local places have been just off the charts. But I kept driving around. There's no rest for the weary or for the wicked. So this is Plumas Eureka State Park, just gorgeous.
Right.
Already closed right now because the EPA is doing testing on the water. This is at the Fox and Goose restaurant, a pub in Sacramento that I told people to decorate the parks, do whatever they want to do, and she decorated the parks. This is what it looks like. One of the parks I visited along the Mendocino coast was already closed, and it's been closed for other reasons. And that's not a very inviting sight unless you're probably a vandal. This is just last week. So my friend said, Alden, you got to get serious and make the buckets clear so people can see the money and they want to donate more. And so my friend at Sebastopol Hardware donated 23 buckets, and they've all gone out to different branches of Bank of Marin and Napa, Sonoma, Marin, and San Francisco, and then also at Sebastopol Hardware. This is the first day, very first day I collected donations right at Bridgeport. And even a Dodger and a Giants fan can agree that the parks are important, so I thought that was funny. But that was literally the first day. I didn't know what to do, but I just thought, well, I know what I can do. And what I can do is grab a bucket and go start the ball rolling.
Well, great missions often start that way.
Yep. So that was fun. And so then the San Francisco Chronicle article definitely was the one that sort of put it on the big map. And that's when the money started to, add up a little quicker and started to get calls and emails from people around the state and, KPFA, different radio stations. And there's local Mother Truckers, and they're doing a great job. It's the coffee shop up in San Juan, Ridgestop Cafe. They're doing a great job. So then the letters started just pouring in, and that was what the letters started to kind of come at a point where I definitely was feeling like am I alone in this journey, and then I realized I'm not, and the people definitely started to encourage me and write letters and talk about
and when you think about it, I mean, actually taking the time not only to give you funds, but to write a letter, hand-dress an envelope, find a stamp, mail it, that really is a commitment.
It's a commitment. And
so,
on the financial side, that meant that it rarely was $1. It was usually more if you're going to commit that much. But in the good news is that, people seem to have this need to tell me which parks they were helping to save and which of their family members like the parks, what their families' names are. I mean, it's kind of like a Dear Abby thing.
And I think it shows you the connection people have to the park.
People have a big connection, yeah. People have memories, and these ones probably can save for later, I think.
Oh, yeah.
These are the second section.
Yeah.
Probably save them till later.
Yeah. So, and we will talk about, the meaning of all this, and I think we all agree that there's a funding crisis in California. It's not that people have made this up, but on the other hand, I think, there's always an open question in my mind, having worked in the legislature for 13 years, as to whether or not we actually have the right tax structure in place. And there was a Revenue Tax Committee one time did a study, and what they did was they looked at what Ronald Reagan had proposed for tax structure, and if you put it into place right now, we wouldn't have a deficit; we'd be doing a surplus if we actually had Ronald Reagan's tax bracket. So
it wouldn't surprise me.
how much we've chipped away in terms of the budget, and people don't realize, but the budget today, the state general fund budget, is about 20% lower in actual dollars, not adjusted dollars, than it was 5-10 years ago. We're going downhill fast on that, and I think at some point somebody's got to stand up and say, we've cut enough.
Well, we have to, and we're going in the wrong direction, and that's what in the short term it sounds nice. Okay, you raise some money, but there are some long-term questions that people are asking me. Well, so if you save them this year, what happens next year?
Yeah, exactly.
So and I've met with everyone in Sacramento I can meet except for the governor, and he's next on the list.
Right.
But those are bigger questions, and that's why, like I've said, there might be a philosophy issue. You've read Frederick Law Olmsted's words, and we state them on our website. Yet, do we follow them? And if we don't follow them, then that's a separate issue. But if the people think we do, and the legislators are not acting, then either we
Right.
need to elect new officials, or we need to figure out why they're not listening.
Right.
But they're clearly not listening because.
So now we have, we also have a B-roll that we want to show that's a little bit about all the parks, right? I mean, there's another little video.
Yeah, and hopefully there's audio with this one because there's definitely this is kind of just a no. Oh,
So we don't have audio, but we will talk over the video. So get ready to
Yeah,
do your
to more
very
narrate.
best voiceover.
Sure.
Let's roll the video.
well, it's a cool song by my friend, but that's okay.
Maybe we don't even have the video.
No, I'm sure we do.
There it is.
So this is, I guess, just sort of, going through a little bit of all the parks. So obviously we're looking at the South Yuba River, and then I went to Malakoff, and these are the things that would be lost. There's people, they didn't know that it was closing. Plumas Eureka. These are just beautiful. China Camp and Marin. Just gorgeous parks. Jug Handle, obviously the one my dad started with and built. And then I started just doing these PSAs. Here I am at all the parks. Here's what it means. Here's how you can get involved. Try to encourage people, motivate them. A lot of people in the state are already throwing up their hands and saying the fight's over, and I'm just saying it's not over. It's just beginning. These people just come to Jug Handle for the first time. These people didn't know Malakoff was on the list to be closed. There's a lot of education, and like I said, time is still the biggest enemy because this is all happening so fast. And these are school kids that are obviously hard to resist at Marin shouting, "Don't close our parks." And there's a lot of education that goes on at the parks. And that was my dad's biggest mission, was education. And was the best place to educate is where nature makes her classroom, is what he said. He said it right on those bluffs right above where I'm standing right there, sitting. And where nature makes her classroom, that's where the best place to do education is, better than the classroom, or better than the inside the classroom in some respects. And so we don't want to shut those things down. That was her first day in Mendocino County. I couldn't believe it. So that's just trying to, call to action to get people involved. It's definitely interesting to see the challenge of motivating people and then keeping them motivated. This guy from England, see, there's a guy from England giving $1. So that's me saying, if England cares about our parks, I think California should care about our parks. And these are the kind of things that go on at our parks. People get together. People have memories. Kids are taught how the world works. That little kid is asking, "Is this really your dad on the button?" That's really my dad, man.
10 seconds.
So, well, great. That's sorry we didn't have the audio for it. I think that what we need to talk about, Alden, is probably I think is that philosophy. I mean, how do you get across to the voting public that we're not now cutting just fat, as it were?
Yeah.
That when you're starting to close these parks, it's way beyond that time that we're cutting fat. We're cutting out the heart and soul of California and culture. And, we're facing this with the arts. We're facing this with libraries and parks, which, for some people, maybe they don't see that as an important part of what government does. But for, I think, the vast majority of people, this is their connection to, the benefits of being a member of the society. You get to have, it's not just rich people who can, own culture and own beauty, natural beauty. I mean, it's a birthright of all Californians. Yeah,
and it's one of the areas that, that, like you mentioned, rich, poor, political classes, doesn't matter. The parks are for us as humans.
Right.
And Frederick Law Olmsted believed that there were, actual health benefits to being outside, and I think so too. And, Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles is a good example. That park is always open and it's always free. And it's because of a large endowment, but it's because the guy who donated said that all classes of people should be able to learn about science and astronomy, and it should be open to everybody. And when I lived in Hollywood, right at the base of that, and I loved that. And I think that's how the parks, I think you're right, that's how people view our parks. And I think we all know that as hard as it is to maintain something, it's a lot harder to close it and then try to reopen it.
Right.
People forget quickly. We have short-term, memory sometimes.
Right.
People forget, and
I think those are the issues. I mean, one, there's a cost to keeping the parks closed just to guard them.
$3.5 million.
3.5 million just
Yeah.
to close them.
Yeah.
There'll be a cost if you cut the workforce, and then somehow money appears or they get privatized, whatever solution is. People have to come back in and retrain people that
Right.
have already been trained. There's a cost in that.
Right.
There's an economic cost to the economies of the local areas, much of which are in the rural areas.
Right, which no one has been talking about yet.
Yeah.
No one has really been digging down and demanding from Sacramento that we need those numbers.
Right.
Publicize those numbers of what impacted local economies. Because I guarantee you, I would guess that it's more than we think we're saving by
Yes.
closing the parks.
By all means,
By a lot,
no doubt,
by a large portion.
no doubt. And then there's the physical damage that could occur when there's not a ranger there. I mean,
Right.
these are not parks that, some of them are really isolated, but some of them aren't. And some of them will get vandalized if they're not protected.
Especially when you make an announcement.
Yeah.
It's one thing that right now some of the parks are already closed on Mondays and Tuesdays or whatever. But when you make an announcement, we are California and we're closing 70 of our parks. It's sort of like an open invitation for certain people to go exploit that. And
Right.
all it takes is a little bit of damage. And then who pays to fix that damage if we run into better times in 3 years and we're going to reopen them? Well, we pay that. And I guarantee it's going to be more
Right.
expensive to close them than it is to keep them open.
Right. It really is a case of, penny wise, pound foolish. So let's talk about some of the solutions that you've you mentioned to me off camera. I mean, what could happen in this crisis? I mean, what could be some of the answers?
Well, I mean, money is the first solution, but obviously it's not the only. AB 42 is good about allowing nonprofits to work with the state and develop actual relationships.
And would that mean that a local nonprofit would actually run a park?
Some people are saying that. I don't think personally, as much as I love the local organizations in all the parks, I don't think they quite have the capacity to run the park. Someone doesn't get up at 7 a.m. and go unlock a gate unless they're paid to do it most of the time, unless it's their own gate or taking out the garbage.
Right.
So I think to motivate volunteers, it has to be in certain areas.
Right.
So long-term...
And plus, the history of volunteerism in a lot of areas shows that you have this initial bump of
Right.
the people who organize it, but
Right.
then, 5 years later, they get tired, they move away, and it's really hard to sustain a volunteer operational group of people. I mean, we
Right.
know that.
Yeah, I think we have to have that talk about philosophy. I think we have to
Right.
demand that discussion of, do we have a disagreement on the parks are important? Not that they're important enough to lavish tons of money on and whatever, but to have a minimum standard that we stop talking about going underneath.
Right.
And we have to have that discussion, because before that, everything else is a waste unless we know what we're talking about. You can't, if your spouse wants to get rid of the car and try to walk to work, and the other spouse doesn't want to, that you got to have it before one of them sells the car, and you
Right.
realize, oh shoot, it's snowing out, and he agreed that I'm walking to work. I mean, so.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the penetration. I mean, you might not have the numbers, but do you have a sense of how many Californians actually visit California state parks?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't have the numbers are in the car, unfortunately, but no, I mean, it's millions. And I mean, how many worldwide? I mean, just in that little short video we saw, I met a girl from France, Mendocino for the first time, guy from England, put money in the bucket. People, plan their trips to California around, the cities and areas that we know, Sierra Nevada, Lake Tahoe, San Francisco, LA, the wine country. But within those places are hundreds of these parks. I mean,
Right.
so people stop by. The one couple that I had met, they were going along Highway 49 and just stopping at everything that looked interesting.
Right.
Well, you're stopping every few miles on Highway 49 if you're starting down in Yosemite, because the whole highway is interesting.
And I know that you can go online, or you could see any number of programs on television that talk about staycations, where people who don't have a lot of money now, what do? Well, they don't not go anywhere. They go local. And,
They go local, yeah.
And
how many
state
people?
parks
right.
are the key asset that they would have in order to visit. That's not going to break the bank.
Right. And how many people, because everyone has favorite parks. So even locally, people have favorite parks. But what about the parks that are local and maybe a lot of people don't know that they're there? There are a lot of those parks that, sometimes people just need to try something new once in a while. And
Right.
you find that that's what I've been trying to encourage people to know your local parks that are on the closure list, get to know the rangers, ask how you can volunteer right now.
Right.
Get in the habit of it because you might be needed down the road.
Right.
And if you already do it once, doing it the second time will be a lot easier.
Right. Now, another issue, I was talking to Penelope Curtis, who's part of our staff now, working on an Arts Council grant here, that, and of course is an expert on natural conservancy and so forth. And she was saying that there's a move afoot that she just learned about today to close Bodie.
Yeah, I haven't heard about that one yet. But I
And
can't
closing
imagine.
Bodie was also, it was interesting because it was linked to, well, if it's going to be closed, why not open it to mining?
Right.
And so,
Because nothing stays closed. People will figure out another use for something.
right,
so
exactly.
That's why,
I mean, I think somebody will make that argument. They'll say,
Oh, yeah.
well, there's an asset here, and it's in mothballs. Why not, develop it?
Right, and the way we protect from that is that a lot of and I have requested already, and I've gotten a few of these, the agreements from the original people that donated these parks to the
Right.
state, and a lot of them, for example, Jug Handle, it states right in it, if you can't manage it, basically it's paraphrasing, if you can't handle it, it reverts back to us. And when I say us, I mean all the different people that came together to donate.
make it, right.
Now, how do you track down those different people? It's a nightmare. That's why it's easier to keep it open.
Right.
And the privatization of something like Bodie, I can't imagine because that, it's a historical, just such a historical site.
Right.
And it's so out there and remote that I don't know. I'll have to look into that one.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. For people who have never been there, Bodie is out in, I want to say...
Off of Highway 395.
Right, yeah,
north
off of
Ridge-
395 as you go down the eastern slope.
Yeah.
And
On the way
it's a
to Mono
ghost
Lake.
town, but it's a pristine, because it's in a very dry, high place. A lot of the buildings are intact, and you don't get the moisture,
Right.
and the issues with moisture. And so Bodie is one of the best preserved ghost towns in all of the West Coast.
Yeah, and you wouldn't want to damage the buildings, and Mono Lake is unfortunately on the list also, which is right down the road from
Right.
Bodie, and people have been trying to save Mono Lake for years and save the water level, but the Mono Lake tufa. I mean, if I'm not a geologist, but if I were, those are very interesting and important things to save, and so. The different formations of the salt and everything there. And so, but that's the thing. Every park has a story. Every park to the people locally, when I visit them, they all say, well, I don't know about those parks, Alden, but our
Right.
park is really special. Ours is really special. You really can't close our park. They really can't, they don't understand what's really here. Well, that's how everyone is. That's how people are with their kids. Well, my kid would never do that.
Right. And one of the interesting things that Frederick Olmsted said to the California legislature in 1865, knowing full well that it was so difficult to get Yosemite, that he pointed out in his report that as much as I rave about it in my report, it's still not going to convince you. You have to actually be there. Right. And I think that's maybe one of the issues, is that we have this very small legislature. A lot of people don't get that a California senator has more people in their district than a congressman.
I didn't know that.
And so we have 40 senators and we have 53, I think, congressmen. And so in a way, the Constitution that designed the California state government is outgrown itself. And our senators are so large. I work for Senator Mello down in the Monterey district, and he used to get 125,000 phone calls into his offices, 100,000 letters a year. And it's just impossible for any one person to be able to represent that, although he was always back in his district. But, what's Bodie to somebody who's never been there, And a lot of these state parks are like that. I imagine the legislators don't have a really good sense of what that's like.
Well, and to prove that, Jug Handle is on the list, not even because of financial reasons. It's on the list just based on proximity. That there's a beach to the north and a lighthouse to the south that are on the list, and they don't think they could spare a ranger just for Jug Handle, which obviously doesn't sit well with me. So if you're not even going to save some money from it, then
what's the point?
Get it off the list.
Yeah.
So
I think that I would like to see, for those who are out there listening to this program, if you come up with a way of figuring out park impact, call us up.
Well, I have the numbers out in the car. I can get you the numbers.
the numbers of hours of the average person that, you know, thinks about plans, executes, goes to the park, stays in the park. I mean, what is lost is going to be very difficult to quantify, but it's a huge part of a class of Californians' lives. I mean,
Oh yeah, no, it's
I mean,
a huge
the summers, just huge amount of people.
Well,
plan their whole summers about the
but
trip to the park.
ask REI. How
Yeah.
many people buy outdoor? How many people buy tents? How many people buy camping
Exactly.
equipment? You know, how many people go and buy new shoes? You know, new hiking shoes. You know, ask Yosemite how many people, you know, overflowed the Half Dome
Right.
registration to walk up Half Dome this year. I mean, you know, the parks are huge.
And we sit and rail against kids getting obese. Kids are sitting at home playing video games. They're not paying attention.
And then we're gonna
we
cut off a channel.
They cut
Yeah.
the channel off
Yeah.
to the maybe main thing that they could get,
Right.
a real education in the world.
That's free or pretty cheap.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, when you start delving into these kinds of ideas and arguments, it's a wonder to me how people can actually do what they do. You know,
That we even got
legislators,
this
you know.
far. I know.
And moreover, the voters. I mean, you know, it's easy to pin the legislators because they're the guys actually making the votes. But, you know, believe me, you know, the voters have got to stop believing that the government is full of fat and start believing that there are essential services to every part of the government. And as you said, there's a minimum amount you have to do for libraries, for the arts, or for
Right.
parks.
Right.
Past which you are really cutting out the whole thing. You're starting to diminish the capacity of these people to function at all.
Yeah.
And so, you know, to me, it would be interesting to have that set. What happens, just a little description from being in the legislative staff, what happens is you have healthcare and critical healthcare, hospitals, gets all the play. It gets all the attention, and you can't cut it. It's a sacred cow because, well, people are dying. People are in, you know, nursing homes.
And prisons, unfortunately.
And prisons.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. And so what you're up against is not only the rest of the you know, discretionary funding getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. These other areas of state expenditures are going up as we speak.
Right.
And in
Well,
fact,
Jerry Brown just announced, and this, you know, I'm a filmmaker, so, but he just announced he was going to give, I can't remember, I think it was $100 million to Hollywood to encourage continue filming in California. So $100 million to Hollywood, but cutting just $22 million from parks to cut 70 parks, that doesn't match. It just doesn't match up. And I'm all for keeping filming in California. That's the thing. I'm for both, but the money doesn't match up. This 22 million number is just a ridiculous number for it impacting 70 parks and millions of people in these communities. It's just
well, so let's go there. What would stop us from putting a little toll gate out front and instead of charging for parking, let's say, you know, what's wrong with charging a family $30 or $50 to enter the park for the day?
well, a lot of things.
Advocate.
yeah. I mean, I think that's a bit, obviously, you know, a little bit much. But I think that, for example, our national parks are marketed much better as far as the annual pass.
Right.
It's marketed better. Our state parks are not marketed well from an annual pass standpoint. That's why Prop 21 didn't pass. It didn't not pass because of the voters. It didn't pass because it was mismarketed. And I've gotten them to admit that. I've spoken to people that admit it. Yeah, it was a little much at a tough time in the economy. Yeah,
Explain
it was a
to the
little
people
bit.
what that required.
Well, Prop 21 was $18 that would have gone on our vehicle registration at a time when government was already asking for more money from the average person. We had already had our taxes go up a percentage point for a temporary thing, I think for 2 years or one or 2 years. And $18, you know, might not sound like a lot, but they've admitted to me, at least behind closed doors, that if it would have been 8 or 12, it probably would have, you know, passed, you know, without question. Their marketing, they marketed late and they marketed kind of light. A lot of people didn't know that it would have included an annual pass for California residents to the parks. I didn't even know that until after the vote. That just wasn't made mention of. If I was the marketing person, I would have mentioned that at the beginning. Buy an annual pass for included in your vehicle registration. And then you would encourage participation in the parks. More people would be visiting the parks. They'd be spending money on the way to the park, spending money on the way back, and enjoying the park. And when you learn about something, you're more likely to go it and to go there and tell other people.
Especially since you would say, I already paid. I did pay this $18, $10, $12, whatever it would be.
But it's more in your consciousness. You know how when your neighbor buys a new car and then the next month you see that car everywhere. All of a sudden, that car was around, but you're aware of it now. So
Right.
you go to a park once, you're going to go there twice. You're going to tell other people to go there.
Right. All right. Let's ask another question. Another devil's advocate question. Big rage all around the country is privatizing libraries. And when we did a study here in the county, we found out really why that. Privatizing the libraries. Let me tell you, there's a hidden cost there that you might
Right.
not even begin
Right.
to believe. So, private venture come in and say, well, we could do it for cheaper than the state does it. What about privatization?
Well, I mean, my joke with privatization is, do we want Thumper's Meadow and Bambi's Stream?
'Cause that's what you'll get.
Because that's what you'll get eventually. The unfortunate part that the state is saying right now is that one example, Lagunitas Brewing Company in Marin has offered to take up the slack for one of the parks in Marin. Well, people are saying, well, we don't want privatization. And the state's saying, no, you can't help out unless you just want to give us money. And if you just want to, that's a tough thing to say. So I think we definitely need to, it's okay to look into it, but like I said, we have to talk about the philosophy of,
Right.
do we care about parks? Right. If we're not all on the same page between the citizens and the elected officials, then we have a discussion that we need to have.
And there's some things that you just can't actually pay for on a point of service thing. That's about the infrastructure building. It's about only the government really can do this well,
Yeah.
because only the government can figure out, an even-handed way of putting the resources in the right place and not making it a popularity contest and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I always used to tell legislators talk about arts is that how do you recoup in the private sector a mural? Where you put every time I look at the mural, I put a dime in there's no
Right,
way
you
to do
can't.
it.
Yeah.
It's a public good. You have
Yeah.
to just understand from the get-go that that the environment is enhanced, and you either pay for it, you don't. But as you're talking about, the amount of money that we spend on these amenities is so ridiculously low. The California Arts Council gets $5 million a year. It's the worst in the country. $5 million in a state of 30 some odd million,
Yeah.
it's like 10 cents per person. I mean,
Yeah.
it's absolutely ridiculous. Do you not want, how much does it count that kids are not getting arts and music in school at all?
Yeah.
How much does it count for the
Well, that's what I
future
mean.
of the
That's-
kids
that's why
that
they're-
can't go to a state park?
Yeah, and that's why there should be, even if there were just a pie chart of a percentage where, granted, let's say our general fund dropped in half. Okay, well then the parks should get cut as much as everyone else. I'm not saying here to say that parks are more important than hospitals, more important than arts or anything, but they shouldn't be cut twice as much as everyone else.
Right.
That's
Well,
what I
here's the
don't
key.
understand.
What people don't understand is the legislature is faced with the situation that if you use federal matching requirements in order to get federal dollars, and you count all of the initiatives that we, the voters, have passed, that takes up 88% of the entire state budget. And it used to be 20 years ago when I was working in state government that figure was more like 65 or 70%. And so what we've done is we've cut
Let
the
that
budget.
get too large. Yeah.
That has grown, and as you say, with prisons, and which is a federal mandate, because the federal court's looking at our prisons.
Right.
So you've got all these situations, and the legislators up there with a shrinking pot trying to fund all of these other kinds of discretionary funding. And so in a way, not to be the big defender of legislators, but their hands are tied. We tied them.
Yeah.
And so, we worry about going to initiative routes, but that's the name of the game. That's what's happened to the way in which we fund things.
And I think at the end of all this, the talk, what I came to was that I don't have all those answers. You know what I mean? I just don't. I don't want to get into politics. I'm not in politics now. I have no desire to be in politics. So my message to people continues to just do what you can.
Yeah.
What I know how to do is to drive around and talk to people. And so that's what I've been doing.
Right.
And to
And
raise
$1
awareness.
per person
And
would
$1
work.
a person, yeah.
Happens
and
that would work.
And it seems to be simple enough that people like it. And I'll be honest, if this wasn't fun, it wouldn't work. And if this wasn't something if this was something I had to convince people, it wouldn't work. I don't have to convince anyone to care about parks. And no one has denied, $1 to me yet. And I haven't had to ask for it. That's what's cool.
Right.
I haven't had to ask for $1 because people just say, who's the guy on the bucket? And I start talking about it, talking about the parks, then
Right. It's
the wallet
interesting
comes
that a state budget like that could get so cut when there is absolutely no opposition. I mean, some stuff has got great opposition. The You got environmentalists who are working to make sure that the forests aren't, so therefore lumber companies are going, well, we can't survive because of the environmentalists. And there's a
Everyone's
lot
on
of
the same page
check
with
and
this.
balance. Yeah,
Yeah.
with parks, you can't find any opposition.
Well, yeah,
Nobody says it's a bad idea.
Yeah, and what other cause are environmentalists and business people on the same page?
Yeah.
And that they are on this.
Right.
Keep the parks open. Keep it available for everyone. We're all on the same page.
Right.
So I think we should be able to do it. We have to prove it though with our dollars.
Yeah.
And our votes.
And not to speak of, we didn't get a long way into the the educational factor, but our schools are being cut. The school day is being cut. There's more and more kids in every classroom. Teachers are hampered by all kinds of different schemes and high-stakes testing.
Right. So at the very least, wouldn't you like to say, hey, Johnny, we're off school today. We're going to go to a park and we're going to learn something.
Exactly.
We're going to learn about the oak
trees. So when you
trees.
take that away,
Yeah.
now you're really giving our kids a sterile experience about what life's about.
And then we have no one to blame when we have an obesity problem and a video game problem or whatever.
Right.
So.
Now we do have a couple of JPEGs that we haven't shown that you mentioned, and I
Sure.
think they're of JPEGs that maybe your father is
Images,
in them.
yeah.
So let's roll those.
Yeah, this is Dad with a big starfish. Starfish, I don't know if you know, but when they lose one leg, they grow another one. So he's here with a 10 or 12-legged starfish. That's my brother in the background. And this would have been at the tide pools of Jug Handle in Mendocino, late 60s. And he's got the classic Steve McQueen sweater. And then this would have been the across California trips in the early 70s probably. I think this one was near Donner Summit. And talking to school kids, closing his eyes, as people around here know, that's what he did. And that's where he was at his best. This was the rare trip, actually, that we did get to spend together with my brother and I when we were teenagers. We went up to Emigrant Gap and spent a long 5-6 day trip with Dad and my uncle and my cousin and got to hike around. And this was actually the one thing even that he talked of later when he was on his deathbed of cancer, is that he really enjoyed that trip. And that was a time when we got to spend together. And this was a great picture from the National Geographic book about John Muir, Nature's Visionary, that came out a couple years ago. They did, the last chapter was on people that are passing on the torch, and he was fortunate to get in there. So that was a nice
Interestingly enough, I never did meet your dad.
Oh, you didn't?
Although,
well, you can see the movie, and
a couple of it was maybe 2-3 weeks before he passed, he did call, and he said, "Hi, this is John Olmsted. You probably don't know who I am." I said, "Yeah, I do know who you are." I said, "Well, this is Paul Menacucci. You probably don't." He said, "No, I know who you are." That's why I'm calling. I was wondering, Paul, can you get some cameras out to cover some of the events, the movie, and so forth?
Oh, really?
And we ended up having a really interesting half-hour discussion about parks and and the wilderness in California.
Yeah,
so it was a real blessing for me.
That's cool.
That I got a chance to interact with your dad before he passed on. Because I think the station, we probably could do a lot better job of developing a sense of our outdoors than we do. I mean, we don't have enough, in my judgment, enough programming that really.
Well, I have 5 PSAs for you that I've made about
the
parks.
Yeah, there we got some PSAs. Yeah, well, the rules and regulations
I
that
know.
we can't really be asking directly for money because that's
No, we
that's
wouldn't
part
want
of
to
the
do
access.
that. We just want to save the parks.
But we do want to, we can talk about the need and the requirement.
Yeah, and people can always find out more information at johnolmsted.net, and they can find out what's going on and how they can get involved.
And they can write letters to you?
They can write letters to me. They are welcome. And I will give the governor a stack of letters. I don't want to just give him a check.
Right.
I want to give him...
Right, because it's about participation.
Yeah, it's about participation. I don't want just a big fat check from a corporation, because too often we think that we'll get bailed out, and I think that's the wrong message. We're all in this together, and we can do it, and that's the important thing to remember.
Right. I think we should ask Jerry, say, what other initiative can you imagine would have so many unsolicited letters written?
Right.
I mean, it's not about putting another McDonald's down the street.
Arnold got a record number of letters when he tried to close 220 of the parks in 2009. 130,000 letters, more than ever in history over one initiative. Right. So I would like to match that number and do 130,001 letters for this.
So let's talk about, other than giving money. We've got about 3 minutes left. What's the advice to people who might be listening to the program? What can they do? To write a letter?
I would say, number one, know which parks that are on the list are in your area. And
Right.
you can go and find the list online. Obviously, 70 park closures. You type it in, you'll find it. know if there are parks that you weren't aware of, and then go to the parks, meet the rangers, get to know their first names, introduce yourself, and so what can we do? Can we volunteer? Do you have? And then find out the local park association. Every park's got an association. Friends of Santa Cruz State Parks, Save the Redwoods.
So find out the name of the state park and then just Google that online.
And then ask the ranger who is an association that manages volunteers. How can I volunteer? And what's being done? And do you need any help? And what can we do? And the more involved you are, just naturally, you will care more and you'll give more and participate. Just get involved.
Are there any? Did you know of any protests or anything planned at the state capitol right now? Or?
Nothing real that I'm planning until we get to that point of next June, which is at the end of June next year would be when the official closures would theoretically happen. So they had said September 1st, but that was really kind of misleading. That just means that some of the parks that shut down for the winter, they're going to start shutting down, but they're not closed yet. So really not till next June. So if I do plan anything for the Capitol, that would be next June.
And is there any legislation or anything that you've got in your mind yet?
Well, I mean, the State Parks Foundation that failed on Prop 21, they're still nursing their wounds, unfortunately, a little bit from that. In my opinion, they should forget about the past and go forward. They are thinking about another version of that, a lower cost and a little better marketed, and that might be a possibility. I personally would love to see on future tax forms a little box that says give $1 to the parks. Just $1 to the parks. Because how many million people do that? And that little boost. And so that's what I've started my own nonprofit, and it's just going to be to support the parks. And that's it. One mission, one goal, and it's the simplest one I can think of. It's just if the parks need help, I'll help them.
That's about all we have time for now. But Alden, it was a real pleasure to have you aboard, and
thank you.
All of us around here believe in what you're doing, so keep it up. We're going to be in the next couple of weeks. We're going to be talking about the Italian American Festa that's coming in September, and then we'll be back talking about traumatic brain injury later on in some of our series. So this is Paul Minicucci saying bye-bye until next time.
And now, another fact of Congress.
Every year, Congress must consider and debate hundreds of very important matters. Imagine what it would look and sound like if the entire Congress discussed each and every topic before it. Well, thankfully, members of both the House and Senate belong to individual committees that focus on a particular subject, like education or the environment. When a member introduces a bill that she would like to see become a law, it is immediately sent to a committee, where it is studied in detail. Committee members hear experts talk about why this particular bill is or isn't a good idea. And committees are tough graders. The vast majority of bills introduced never make it out of committee. So when you think of where the work really gets done in Congress, think committees.
This fact of Congress is adjourned. And now, another fact of Congress.
Our country depends on citizen participation. But if you don't participate, things get messy. Think if